Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of BizTalk Weekly. I'm your host, Greg Johnson with Focal Point. Our guest today is Justin Zenanko with SynerFuse. Justin, and if I didn't pronounce anything right in there, you let me know. But thank you for being our guest today, Justin. And can you give our audience a little bit of an introduction and background for you?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me. It's always great to be talking to local fellow business owners and entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
and always appreciate the ability to talk about what we're doing at SynerFuse and the impact we could potentially have. So, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
As far as my background goes, I grew up in a small farm, hobby farm with my dad, who was a furniture entrepreneur in the secondary market. But I also learned about taking care of animals and started working when I was about 8 years old. And fast tracked that, I ended up going to college where I ended up being a triple major in accounting, economics, and marketing. I got out of there in 3 years and started as a CPA in a local CPA firm called Mislac, where I was exposed to both taxes, accounting, and auditing. And I ended up becoming a CFO of a biotech company locally in town, where we raised over $70 million.
Hmm.
And then in 2018, I met a neurosurgeon who was telling me about these patients that he was treating with spinal cord stimulation that had back fusions, and about the problem with back fusions and opioids, and the issue that when you go to get a back surgery, you're not having the successful outcomes like we see with hip replacement, hip
Hmm.
surgery, knee surgery. This is kind of a space that's about 30 years behind, and I was very intrigued by that. And that's how I became the founder and the CEO of SynerFuse. It all started with that conversation with the neurosurgeon talking about back pain and how there could be a better way of combining stimulation at the time of fusion.
Hmm. It's a great story. What, 3 degrees in 3 years? Now that's impressive.
Yeah, I was taking like 8 classes a semester, and then I was also part of a fraternity, so fraternity life, which
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know you learn about time management, and sometimes you would go to class and you weren't maybe completely sober.
Where'd you go to school?
So I went to a college in Indianola, Iowa, called Simpson College, which was about
Oh,
2,000 students.
I know it well. That's
Yep. So
yeah. It's a good school. It's a really good school.
yeah, and I had every year or every quarter I had to actually, or semester, I had to go and actually appeal to the president of the college because it required president's approval. So every time I dressed up in a suit to go in and see him, suit and tie, and came out with approvals.
Good for you. Good for you. You talked about this first meeting you had with a neurosurgeon. I mean, prior to that, were you thinking, hey, someday I'm going to be running my own business? Or was it sort of that discussion you had with the neurosurgeon that inspired you to want to run your own business?
So, because I grew up with a dad and a mom that were very entrepreneurial, that was always in my blood.
Okay.
So, when I went to leave the CPA firm to go work for the biotech company, in that endeavor, that was basically kind of I was going to a startup, no guarantee of salary, no guarantee of anything.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, I also had my own CPA firm where I did taxes. I also still worked in my family's small business, helping them as a part owner. So
Sure.
I've always had entrepreneurship at my core, but what helped me is by being a CPA with that designation, it's a very rare skill set for an entrepreneur to have, because a lot of times entrepreneurs are visionaries and they have, either engineering or, clinical or some expertise, but never do you see finance combined with that skill set
Yeah.
or that expertise. And in my case, because I had that skill set, I knew how to talk about numbers to investors. I knew how to talk to numbers to the team, and how does the numbers translate for us into something that could be, tremendous value if we're successful.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I do think a lot of times business owners and entrepreneurs have trouble talking to kind of the numbers within their business and how they connect, how the numbers connect to the business and vice versa. So I think having that is a very unique background. Did you find that limiting at all? Like having that sort of a background? I mean, that you had two other degrees, so I think you weren't, it wasn't like you were just uh, coming through an accounting um, program. You had exposure to other areas, so I'm assuming that sort of opened up your eyes to other things other than just sort of being in that accounting role for your career.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm an entrepreneur that happens to be an accountant.
Yeah, yeah,
Most people meet me and they would not know that I was an accountant because of the risk taking that I take. Because most accountants are your stereotypical, they're your loner, the person that they don't need any windows, they can be in a dark corner, get a little bit of light, get a little bit of information, and they'll be happy all day sorting out your numbers. Well, that's
yeah,
not me. I like to interact with people. I like to build teams, to build vision, to win people over and bring them to my way of thinking. And that takes, fortitude and, commitment and belief in what you're doing and how to articulate that. And I think that's where part of the marketing came in, part of the economics came in, and the accounting just happened to be the vessel or the highway, if you will, to get onto that road. But very oftentimes entrepreneurs are lacking a lot of that stuff because they just don't know, and then they're having to rely on other professionals to help them. But
right.
because I know that world, I know what to push, I know what to ask for, I know, you know, this other side of the businesses. Because if you think about it, across any business, the one thing that's universal are numbers.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And it's the common denominator when you're talking to investors, right? But investors, bankers, anyone who's going to be providing financing or debt, that really is the common denominator. Yeah.
Well, and also what happens too, when you talk to bankers or you talk to investors or you talk to any of these people, the other thing that's very interesting is they all tend to overcomplicate things, which is like, well, do you have this or do you have that little bell and whistle? And at the end of the day, none of that matters. What matters is, A, do you understand it? B, do they understand it? And C, if you make value or create value, can you actually extract the value as far as a return?
Right.
And so often you get all these complicated structures which nobody understands
Hmm.
except the banker. And it's like, well, if I can't understand it, I'm not going to sell it because I have to believe in what I'm selling.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times that gets lost in translation because they're trying to promote something else, where at the end of the day, what I found, simple is better and understandable is better. And when we combine all of that together, it just aligns everybody because you know why you're doing what you're doing, as opposed to, well, if I make this, am I going to actually get a return? Am I going to actually have something?
Yeah, that is really well said, Justin. You just talked a few minutes ago about risk, and there's no doubt, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're gonna be in risk situations. Can you talk about a time in the business where, you really had like a fork in the road, so to speak, where you had to make a decision, maybe you had to take a big risk, and just, what were those circumstances and what was the outcome and what did you learn through that process?
So I guess I'd say I've always taken risk. One thing in particular I do remember is when I signed up for $1 million worth of equipment, and it was financed, and or actually it wasn't even, it was financed by the payables, and we were supposed to receive $13 million, and I was being very prudent as a CPA. And I listened to the investment bank. And I'm like, okay, we got 13 million coming in. Of course, I can sign up for $1 million. That's a no-brainer. When we gotta get going now. And I got pressures from the CEO and all this stuff back then. So I do that, and we have no money. No money's coming in. So, I'm on the hook for this, and I'm, playing the game of, I have myself and an admin person. And eventually the person, gets a hold of me, 90 days out and says, "Hey, we haven't received a payment. We haven't received this or that, you know." And I said, "Well, when did you send it?" They said, "Oh, well, we sent it to you, 3 months ago." I said, "Oh, you need to send that to my admin person because she does all of the payables." And then you're playing the game of, the cash flow, if you will.
Right.
And before you know it, and then I said, well, it's going to take about 30 days to get into the system, and then another 30 days for review, and another 30 days for approval. So I buy myself basically 180 days. And then, I'm working on getting payments. I'm like, yep, we got it. We're going to get you paid. Don't worry.
Mhm.
And I ended up stretching this thing out to about 18 months, but they got fully paid. But it was one of those things where you can't panic. You need to figure out how to work. And again, I was, bending the areas because this was a big company. It wasn't a small company where, if they don't get the money, they're out of business.
Right.
It's a big company that basically has their rules and their structures. But if you understand the rules and the structures, you can get some of the financing. Now, would I do that again? No. But but I didn't sit there and panic. I worked through it, and you do the things that you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting what you say about your reaction to that, right? And the ability to remain calm, I think, in sort of these, kind of unknown situations, right? Because I'm guessing you didn't know for sure how that was going to turn out. Um, and as an entrepreneur, I think we have to get used to sort of living with a little bit of gray. Like it's not always clear as to how things are going to turn out. Just talk about that for a little bit in terms of how you kind of manage your emotions or your ability to manage through those kind of unknowns.
Well, first off, if you don't have belief in yourself or belief that you're going to be able to move forward with a plan, whatever the plan is, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur because the moment that you create a plan, it's wrong. The moment you create a budget, it's wrong. The moment you start to execute, you're wrong because things that you don't know are going to occur to you, and you have to be able to adapt and live with that on a daily basis and not get flustered. And it's like there's always going to be problems. So don't worry about problems that you can't solve today. Put them somewhere where you can go and you can figure it out with somebody.
Mhm.
And again, a trusted source or a trusted resource or wherever you go. But at the end of the day, you have to have your emotions in check. And again, that doesn't mean you don't express anger, sadness,
Yeah.
happiness, because I do that on a daily basis, and sometimes people can hear me through the windows screaming. But at the same time, it's kind of like when it's I don't sit there and dwell on problems. I dwell on not the problems, but I dwell on, okay, what activities do I need to do to increase my chances of success?
Yeah.
And if you get into the mindset of going into work every single day at the same time, a routine, because sometimes what we do is we say to ourselves, "Oh, there's nothing for me to do today," or "There's very little for me to do." And the one thing that I always find is that every time I have that mentality or that mindset and they come into work, there's like 10 things I forgot, or 10 things that pop up that I wasn't, anticipating or thinking about.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, you just touched on it about you mentioned the word success, and I always like to ask entrepreneurs about, how do you define success for yourself and for your business, and what does that kind of tell you, about yourself, um, as you look at that, at how you define that?
So for me, and I'll just talk about SynerFuse,
Oh,
success is getting an FDA approved device and getting that into patients in the United States. Now, I would not call myself successful because I've not done that. What I've done with my team of brilliant doctors, and really it's to them and to the patients that had the courage to take the risk to be part of the first feasibility trial. So kudos to them. All I am is a facilitator. The reality of it is that those, by us being able to do our 15 patients in human and prove that the ET lift worked, meaning it's safe and it has some efficacy data, 80% off of opioids, 70% reduction in back pain, leg pain, 86% improvement in disability. When I look at all of that, those are all indicators that we're going to get to an approved FDA product, and we're securing our product. Well, at the end of the day, once I have FDA approval, I'm going to feel even that much closer to success. But once we get into thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of patients, then I'm going to consider myself a success. But the goal of success is so high and so up there and so beyond imagination. But it's kind of like what my mother taught me: if you don't aim high, even if you fall short, you're falling short higher than if you never aimed that high to begin with.
right, right.
So my goal is to treat millions of patients and have our therapy in all back fusions. That's my goal, to change the standard of care, to end opioids, to end the pain for people that need back fusions, that have spinal instability, and they need to have a better outcome.
Yeah. The way you just said that, Justin, you speak like a true visionary, because you've got this idea of what it could look like, right? I mean, millions of patients, you think of that and you think of the whole opioid addiction issue we've got in this country. And just the way you expressed that, it sounded very visionary, that's cool. When you're doing FDA approval, I mean, I've heard, and I've never been involved kind of with FDA approval, but I take it that's a long, arduous trip. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean that's the hardest part, is getting
Hmm.
FDA approval, and then the second hardest part is adoption. For us, it was 6 years to get through the proof of concept trial, And, for us going for this pivotal trial, it's a 2-year study, and we think it's going to take about a year to implant 150 patients on a randomized trial. But just to even get to this point was, we're talking 8-9 years. It's not, and it's not for the faint of hearted, because there's a lot easier ways to make money than being a med device.
Yeah. Yeah. But clearly that wasn't, not that you don't want to make money, but clearly that was not, when you were talking there a minute ago about what you wanted to see out of this, that visionary statement you made had nothing to do with money. It only had to do with, bringing this solution to millions of patients. So I think that's awesome. I mean, I tell clients all the time, like, don't focus on the money. Yeah, I understand some, entrepreneurs want to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's your focus, people start to see that. Versus if your focus really is something you've got a passion about or your purpose, that really comes through when you're talking to clients, vendors, investors, stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it this way. We always have to have money in the back of our heads, because if we can't make, if it's not going to make profit, or if it's not going to be profitable to the system, you're not going to be able to help the people that need to be helped.
Very true.
And unfortunately, it's a necessary, I don't want to say evil, but it's a necessary part of our business. However, the driver of it is the outcomes, and the driver of it is these better solutions. And again, when you see these patients get stimulated for the first time, and you see their burning sensations go away, you see them talking about where they feel the tingling of the stem. And these are not educated people. These are not people that understand STEM. These are not people that understand anatomy. These are people who only understand their pain and are in there to get that fixed. But when you see us turn on the device, turn on the stem, and you see in some of these cases, I've seen people completely pain-free. It's one of those things where it impacts you so hard. It's like, holy buckets, you got something that's really incredible here. And the nice thing that I can say is that we've improved 15 patients' lives.
Oh, that's an incredible story. That is really cool. Justin, just changing gears here a little bit. I'm guessing as you've been on this journey, there's been some times you've had some setbacks. Talk a little bit about a time where you had a setback and sort of how you dealt with that, and again, sort of how you related to it in terms of your journey through this entrepreneurial process.
So a lot of my setbacks actually occurred with internal parties, where you think the people that are on your team are aligned with you, and they're aligned with you as long as things are going well. The moment things start getting hard or not going the way they thought it should go, then they try to add value. Then they try to change the way you want to run things. And what unfortunately happens is, if they think there's value there, they attempt coups. They attempt to take you out, to remove you. And what they don't understand is, when you're the largest investor, largest shareholder, largest everything, and you put everything on the line, there is no backing out. There is no escaping.
Right.
If I'm not successful, I'm hurting worse than my shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
So I put myself and align myself with my shareholders, which means that I have fortitude to make the shareholders and myself very successful and profitable. But A lot of times in my setbacks, it's been people changing their plans, and instead of telling you, they attempt to remove you.
Hmm.
And then because they don't understand how corporate governance works or how companies are built with shareholders, they forget that I brought in majority of the shareholders, and those shareholders invested because of me and my vision, not because of them.
Yeah.
And so, again, the only way you overcome these setbacks is you have to have complete confidence and faith in yourself and your ability to be successful and overcome despite whatever challenges you face,
Yeah.
and not being afraid of what people think.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I think that's where um, you can't please everybody, right? You have to do the right thing for the business, and for yourself, right? Not to be selfish, but you need to be true to your own values. And if you've got somebody, kind of in the business that your values don't align, it's going to be trouble. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but at some point that's going to rear its ugly head. And it sounds like that's the case you're describing, where I think it really sounds like you did though stay true to what was important to you and the goal of where you were trying to get to, despite running into those setbacks. Oh,
Right.
yeah. Right. Well, Justin, when you think about the future of, you as an entrepreneur and your business, what what kind of things come to mind? I mean, what do you think the next 12, 24, 36 months holds for you and your business?
So, very good question. So, right now we're in a capital raise, raising 10 million in our Series A. We're at, our current valuation, which has been the same valuation for the past 3 years, and we're at $5 per share. And what we're doing is we're completing our device. We've already done two pre-submissions with the FDA, so we're going back to the FDA with our device for ID approval on 150 patients, up to 20 sites, and we're working with the Big Ten Consortium. So this is public hospital institutions from UCLA, Northwestern, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, University of Indiana, University of Minnesota, and University of Maryland.
That's an impressive list.
Oh yeah, and we're now going to be looking to add here Walter Reed, the VA for the military applications and the veterans,
Awesome.
and then you go all the way to the other side and getting private practice people, and we're going to be engaging the self-insured, the big insurance companies, and and a lot of these labor unions because they deal with back pain.
Ah,
Now, one thing that we're doing, which is unique to us and no one else, is we have sponsored NASCAR, and we're sponsoring about 11 races this year. And we're the only device company to sponsor NASCAR because drivers have back pain, their crews have back pain, the people that are NASCAR fans have back pain, the blue collar workers.
right, right. Well, what a great connection. That's awesome.
Yeah, so what I envision also is that, we're preparing ourselves also to be a publicly traded company, to have all of the infrastructure in place. And I really think based on us getting our trial approved and being in patients by the end of the year, I think 2027, depending on the markets, could be very interesting for us because it might provide us an ability to raise capital from the public markets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just, talk to the extent you can. You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but just like how much of your time is spent in kind of raising capital, um, because that's certainly a unique function that, you know, certain times you have to go through that an entrepreneur, but it's not something that, well, maybe it is something you're doing all the time. just talk about what that is like in terms of the process.
So I'm probably spending 75% of my time raising capital, but in addition to that, or in conjunction to that, I'm also working with clinicians, working with hospitals, working with the key opinion leaders, the surgeons who are going to do the surgeries. And it all kind of comes together. I don't think you ever stop raising capital or ever stop raising awareness of the company. It just happens to what does the company offering, if the company's offering shares or not offering shares.
Yeah.
But as far as the process goes, it's what are the biggest needs of the business at the time, and that's what you focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you focus on everything else.
Yeah, I'm assuming as you're doing some of these, it sounds like you're doing some high level networking, right? I think a lot of folks know networking when they're looking for a job or that sort of thing, but you're doing some really high level networking when you're talking to doctors or clinicians or potential investors. Um, but it sounds like that really consumes a fair bit of your time. And it's necessary, right? I mean, you've got to raise that money to be able to complete your vision.
Right. No, that's 100% correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, hey, Justin, as we kind of wrap up here, just, a lot of folks now have listened to this story. And again, our show, our podcast is geared towards maybe brand new entrepreneurs or even those who are just thinking about business ownership, entrepreneurship. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about going into business ownership?
So what I would say is that you should not even start if you're not really willing to do what it takes to be successful, to risk it. Now, granted, what does risk mean? Everyone's context will be a little different. Scenario will be a little different. In my case, I have $2.5 million invested. I am going all the way over to making things happen, and my mentality is I'm going to put it all on the line. I'm either going to be very successful or I'm going to have nothing.
Yeah.
And because I have such a fear of failure, I will do whatever I need to do to continue to move forward. Now, with that said, I also have other businesses that I've used to subsidize and to move my businesses forward, because if I wasn't doing my tax practice, if I didn't have my commercial real estate, if I didn't have other businesses, no way could SynerFuse afford to pay me, and no way would I be able to do what I'm doing. But because I have other things going, I'm able to support my endeavors. But if you're not prepared to believe in what you're doing, put your own money in, and to bring other people along, if your vision's that big, you need to have other people to help finance you. If you're not willing to talk to people about it, then you shouldn't do it. You need to be willing to put things on the line to move forward. And if you're not, then don't enter into this world.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to that kind of discussion we had earlier about risk taking, I think you're kind of a poster child for the fact that, you're taking a lot of risk and you're putting a lot of not only your time, but a lot of your own money into making this thing work. And I do see that a lot where business owners start a business and then they really aren't willing to make the time commitment, not in terms of just how much time they're putting in, week to week, but they'll give up. They'll give up 6, 8, 12 months after they've started a business. And you got to be in it for the long run, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, that is the problem. Like a lot of the med device CEOs that I am in a cohort with or group with, most of them are backed by VCs. They have none of their own money in the deal. So when things get hard or things don't go the way they think they should go, they just get another job. I don't have that luxury, which meant when COVID hit us, when politics hit us, when coups hit me, I had no choice but to face it, which actually forced me to grow and to get better and stronger. Because we don't learn when things go right, we learn when things go wrong, and how do you overcome the problems.
That was really well said. I like that. And you're so right that when things are good, just about anybody can be a business owner. It's really when you're challenged and you're going through tough times when you find out how good of a business owner, how good of an
Well,
entrepreneur you really are.
well, and it also goes to another thing, which is, I pray to God to give me strength, and God gives me problems. But God gives me the strength to overcome the problems and gave me the gifting. But also, if you think about it and you go back to faith, when you have it to persevere no matter what, and you have no choice but to go over that hill, no choice but to continue moving forward, you become very, very strong, and you start to learn, okay, this isn't working, so what else can I do? How else can I move forward? And
Yeah.
if you have any inkling where you can fail and you can bail, you will fail because problems are going to occur. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how and who. And when you're dealing with failing, and failure after failure, you're going to learn who your true friends are too. And you're going to
Yes.
find out that there's very few friends. There's a lot of acquaintances and a lot of people that want nothing to do with you if you are failing.
Right. Right. Boy, that's so true. That is so true. But I like what you said about you were talking about sort of other mid tech businesses where, if they're leaders of a business, but it's really venture capital that's supporting them, they don't really have skin in the game. They can move from one business to another relatively easy. Where, I think true entrepreneurship is, like you just said, I mean, it's on you, right? And you've got to, there's no off ramp for you. You just have to, work through the issues that come up because there's only kind of one route for you to go, and that is down this road of entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Justin, I really enjoyed our discussion. Thank you again for being on the program. And that concludes another episode of Biz Talk Weekly. Um, Again, thank you, Justin. And until next time, thanks for watching.
Thank you.